Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Good to see ya. Thanks for joining me, and to all those out on LinkedIn Live. Hello, hello, hello. We are so excited to be with you. This has been in the making for, I think, years. This podcast style conversation where we're really holding the space for conversation about ourselves, our workforce, our fellow brothers and sisters who are out in the cyber community, who are living their careers, um, protecting us, and we need to protect them. And I assembled a really cool crew of people here to work with me to not only make sure we all understand this problem very deeply, but also to engage in solutions and stories of solutions that have been implemented and that we're seeing work in moving the needle on what CyberSN is calling workforce risk management. And that really means mental health matters. So, if we're going to retain and develop and have resilient cyber practices, then we need to understand that the management of that is mental, physical, and work health. So on that note, it's good to be with you all. I've got players in the room. I've got Tom Glavich, who's been with us for, gosh, 9 years. Everything we do, you know, Tom, Tom is a huge part of it. So Tom, it's good to have you. We've got Chad Loader, who's joined CyberSN about 3 months ago. Super psyched to have you in this conversation. You have so much experience in this conversation. Love your recent blog about this. And then we have Peter Koronis, who's the founder of CyberMinds, a strategic partner with CyberSN. We are committed to getting what Peter has out to the world. So, on that note, let's start there, Peter. I would really love for you to give us more data of how serious this problem is, and then we'll start talking solutions soon.
Yeah, thank you, Deirdre. Hi, guys. Great to be on the call, and very amped about our relationship, Deirdre, with CyberSN and CyberMinds now working hand in hand to bring some good news, I think, to what is otherwise a pretty scary set of scenarios out there. I think let's start with the scary and move to the hopeful, because I think it's a natural trajectory and it's one that people will relate to. Some numbers that we're seeing, we're doing our own research in CyberMinds as well. And I guess one of the headline findings that came out of the ongoing national baseline study that we're doing in Australia and we're hoping to replicate in the US is that we are seeing cybersecurity professionals, at least on one major metric, burning out faster than frontline healthcare workers. And that is in the aftermath of a pandemic, of the likes of which we haven't seen before in our lifetimes. The metric I'm talking about is actually the one that measures a sense of professional efficacy. How well am I doing in my job? That sense of mastery, that I've chosen the right career and I'm excelling in it. And I guess tied with that hand in hand is this infamous imposter syndrome that we hear about. That metric of a loss of professional efficacy is actually the number one predictor of resignation intent. And I guess that's why it's mapping. We're seeing the resignation rates within CISOs in particular, but also across the spectrum, reaching quite concerning levels. And I think, Deirdre, when you and I met in February this year at our first event in San Francisco, we immediately connected around this concept of that this is a risk management. This is a risk issue. This is not a wellness issue we're
Yeah,
talking about here. And I
yeah,
think with Chad and Dom on the call, we're really going to be orienting the discussion towards the consequences for organizations if we don't manage this
yeah,
very critical and emerging aspect of cybersecurity.
yeah,
Just to return to the actual scale of the problem that we're seeing here, and it's not just our research, but organizations like Gartner have released studies this year showing 60% of cyber leaders have experienced burnout. 44% say that it is they're having multiple instances of burnout. We can talk about the actual dimensions of burnout in a minute. Elsewhere, they say about 2/3 of CISOs report their ability to protect their organization is being compromised by the workload and the stress that they're operating under. 74% are saying that team members are resigning for the same reasons, unmanageable stress. Over in Australia, in APAC, Sophos released a study this year showing the degree of errors that are being made as a result of burnout within our cyber defenders. And so this maps directly to the conversation around risk reduction. And I think finally, just talking about this direct link between these increasing levels of burnout that are really trying to, I think the key takeout from this conversation, I hope, will be that people come to understand that this is a problem that is not going to self-resolve, particularly when we see breaches. And this is another aspect I want to talk to you about, if it's possible, the trauma that teams experience, either
Yeah.
during or immediately after a breach,
Yeah.
is actually contributing to people leaving
Yeah.
the profession in some, not just leaving their specific employer,
Yeah.
but they're leaving the profession because they just never want to go through that again. And unfortunately, that trauma goes with them. It carries with them into wherever else they go. And so we are really orienting and targeting trauma support during breaches, as well as a lot of the preventative work that we are going to be talking about later in this session.
I love it. You've given us three things that we're now going to engage on, and I wrote them all down here. Professional efficacy. I really want to talk about that. That is so clearly a problem, and considering that most of us, or at least certainly what I found when I first came in this industry and still see today, is people not speaking the same language and even what people are doing for a living, such that how does one even measure themselves as to whether they're doing a good job or not when their job description is totally misunderstood? And there is very little measurable agreements and goals to meet to get to the next level or the next level or the next level. And that's what I think of when I think of professional efficacy. And I think I'll save the other two for a minute and we'll just stay on this. But for that first piece, the number one thing that's got us in burnout. It's not are we in burnout? I'll say this: your stat of 60% of folks are in burnout. Those are the 60% that are in burnout and not happy. I say the other 40% are still in burnout, and I want to define what burnout is altogether, but they're happy. It doesn't mean that the things that are happening to their body and their mind or every day are good for them. The hours, the lack of sleep, the not cooking their own meals, the not enough family and loved one time, not enough exercise, right? Like this is all the other 40%, even though you can be in that state and be happy. And that's because we don't have workforce risk management solutions in place that would really mark the calendar of what people are doing, what does done look like, what does go home look like. And yet I know this is 24 by 7, war. And yet that's not an excuse for not creating work cultures that don't create burnout, because this is not a human problem. It's an individual, I should say, excuse me, it's not an individual's problem, it's an organization's problem creating this for individuals, and we've put it on individuals. So let's talk about professional efficacy. We've got all three of you are practitioners and yourselves in cyber. What comes to mind, Dom, when you hear professional efficacy and a cyber professional not feeling good about their career? What does that show up like to you, and what do you see out there?
So I think you touched on it. It's what's success look like? I mean, if you kind of look up and down the cyber career path for cyber leaders, the end game is sometimes clear and sometimes very clouded, depending on flavor of regulatory compliance or temperature of threat actors. The overall goal, you could simply say, is to keep my company safe, ensure the customer privacy, safeguard data. Those are very large strokes, very thick brush strokes. But what does success look like for the leader? What does success look like for
Yeah.
someone that's in the CI/CD pipeline? What does success look like for an entry-level privacy analyst? Defining that success is critical because it's that first rung in the career ladder, and it's what makes you say, "I did something today."
Yeah.
Um, the mission.
Yeah. We
That's
as humans, we like to check things off lists. We like to feel like we've accomplished things. Literally in our DNA. I am so lucky out of college to be hired by two serial entrepreneurs that map this out. And I walked into that and it was all about here's what you have to do. And we met daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, depending on how high we went. And it was everything we were responsible for was measurable. And I myself and hundreds and thousands, and we built Rapid 7 that way too, Chad, right? Took
Yep.
that whole model to right? And it was electric. People would come in and see our environments at these companies and say, this is bottled lightning is what how fast can we give you money? And we were tech people, we were salespeople, we were marketing, we were everything. And we were working our you know what's off as we still do today. And I was not healthy back then. It's nobody's fault at that time because I was smoking coming into it and those types of things, just even out of college, eating too much, what have you. Those are my things. And yet, my point is that when it was all because we knew what we had to do to win. And we knew what we had to do to make more money. And we all wanted to build our lives and buy houses and build families and provide for them. And it was like all you had to do was drive the car.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's how education, should be too. But anyhow, this is not in corporate today. It's more in the government space than anywhere. Thank goodness. And I've always said we need more of that, map it out before you go mentality as they do. But I see this so much, and as the correlation of attackers never stop. So there's that. To human nature needs wins, needs to feel good, needs to feel accomplished, needs to advance, needs to grow, needs to buy and build their life to feel good. And if we don't feel good, we're a vulnerability. Period. We're not going to be very good for our jobs. And Chad, talk to us on this one. What's going through your
Yeah.
head?
Well, I think just sort of building off of what Peter was saying, comparing the levels of burnout among cybersecurity professionals with that of frontline healthcare professionals, and then, Dom talking about what does success look like. I think cybersecurity is, somewhat unique in the professional disciplines because we often, I think, define success poorly. We define the success of a CISO and her security team as sort of the absence of a particular kind of event, right? And we say, okay, we have the CISO here so that we never experience a breach, right? And that's what the security team here is for. And that's like saying we have the emergency care team, we have the ER doctors and the nurses that work with them so that nobody ever dies when they're in the hospital, right? You never lose a patient, right?
Right.
And that's an unattainable, unrealistic goal. And I think that part of why people burn out in cybersecurity is because we sort of have this misconcept of what success looks like, first of all. And I think that trickles down to what does success look like in people's career. And I've had a number, as I'm sure each of you have had conversations with junior people in the field about, let's talk about how you can have a long career and last in this field. Because I see, the way that you're approaching this, and I love the heroism and I love the commitment, but the stress level, we need to take that down. We need to define what success looks like. And for a CISO, the way that I think about a successful CISO, and something that I didn't fully grasp until I took on a CISO role, moving from the vendor role where we think we know everything and we tell CISOs what to do and this is how you should be running your program, to being one, a chief security officer is really a change agent, right? And they're not there to just act like a security guard and keep the bad guys out. They're there to affect change in complex organizational and technical environments. And I think if we start changing that conversation, I think that will trickle down to the people's stress and burnout levels overall.
Yeah, 10 years I've been servicing CISOs, and what I realize in the capacity of talent and workforce risk management these last little over two, and what I can say is that they've always been had the lowest budgets, nothing near what they need for people, a lot of budget for technology, and really struggle defining risk so that they can get the right budgets, and it's not their fault. It's a massively hard thing to do, to really present risk in a way that comes back and being tied to financial investments. And so I think we're just starting to rise out of that with the SEC regulations here in the US, certainly regulations in the world with GDPR and what have you. It seems to be that only regulations move the needle. I'm fond of saying I remember in the early 2000s selling vulnerability management software, and nobody cared until PCI started fining. It was like talking to a brick wall, and as soon as PCI said they were going to fine, we all knew PCI was out there, but it's the fines that mattered. And so I'm happy to see more regulation, and yet I wish we could start to use a carrot as well. I was recently at the White House working with the crew out there, and somebody said to me, Deidre, yeah, you're right, and keep fighting for compliance control, for retaining cyber talent, and I like that. But what about a carrot? And I thought, carrot, wow, I hadn't thought of that since all the impressions I've had all of these years. And so recently I've been thinking a lot about that, and I think that's something that we should continue to bring to the conversation as we all work together, which is how to help organizations get tax credits, insurance credits, in caring for their cyber talent. I know that the programs we're institutionalizing with organizations, these companies are putting us in front of the regulatory teams, their policies teams, and showing off the work we're doing because they know that they're proud that we've got a program to care for our people. And
Well,
that is an operational efficiency. It's tied to cyber and company strategy. Chad.
Yeah, and I think going back to what Peter said, about feeling like I forget the phrase that you used, but a person's sense of professional pride and feeling like they can make a difference at work. And Kenneth Thomas, has a famous book called Intrinsic Motivation, and really talks about compensation is what they call a hygiene factor, which is once you've reached the enough level, then additional compensation does not provide additional motivation. And what really motivates people is being in community, feeling like the work they do makes a difference, having professional pride, and having some level of autonomy, and feeling like they're being looked after and they're looking after others. And that's why burnout is so insidious, because people think, we can get into the definition of burnout. It'd be I think good to jump into, probably let Peter speak to that. But the idea that in certain environments, it's a hard job, we're just going to throw more money at these guys. And why do they continue to leave? Or people are burned out, we're going to give them some comp time, give them a vacation. Why are they burned out now? They just had a vacation. And I think it comes from a misunderstanding of how people and organizations are sustain motivation and what burnout really is.
Yeah. And Peter, I do want you to dig on that. And I just want to say one thing right before, which is because we're in the digital era where we live in devices and everything's so connected 24/7, what you just said no longer exists. But back in the day, before the digital era, it was as simple as vacation in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
More vacation, more money. And those are the days where it was truly 9 to 5,
Yeah.
that doesn't exist anymore, and it sure as heck doesn't exist in cyber.
No, and
even if we were.
there's
Yeah.
places where it doesn't matter how much they're throwing at people, they're
Yeah.
losing people.
Oh, for sure. I mean, today I talked to a C-level. That's exactly what she said to me. I don't need money. I need a great place to work, and I don't.
Yep.
You know, that's secondary. And nobody comes to us and is talking about money. I need to get out of my org because of money. Unless they're their first 5 years in.
Yep.
So to your point in that study, so. Peter, talk to us about burnout. Like we've really, Chad did a great blog last week. He really was like, hey, burnout isn't vacation sleep time. You know, define burnout for us.
There, excuse me, there are many sort of different orientations around this. The gold standard that we use in CyberMinds when we measure burnout is called the Maslach burnout inventory, and it has 3 dimensions. One we've mentioned is this sense of professional efficacy. How well am I doing in my job? That's tied to exactly what you identified, Deirdre, around the visibility of success, or in fact, in our case, the invisibility of success. And to tie that back to the frontline healthcare worker comparison, which I've thought about quite deeply when those stats started coming through, and I was thinking, why would we be worse than emergency, than ER people and first responders in health? It seems to me that you know that you're good at your job in both cybersecurity and in healthcare. But if the patient dies, nobody blames you, generally speaking, unless you've been negligent, which is rare, I would say. That you're using a level of competency to do your best, and the patient will live or die, but you can see the effect, and most of the time the patient will live, and so you get a sense of professional satisfaction, and everyone else sees that too. You did a great job. The family will come up and thank you. We don't see that in cyber. There's no parallel, there's no correlate to that, where an attack is prevented. Probably you're stopping hundreds of attacks, a week even. Who's coming up and saying you're doing a great job because we didn't get attacked?
Yeah.
So I think that's the one dimension, which we can talk more about that, but that definitely for me was the big one. And as I say, that one is the predictor of resignation intent. So unless we can get that stat back up again, where people are feeling connected to mission and purpose and feeling that they are making a difference, and at least within the industry, we should be celebrating our own successes, even if we're not getting it from the C-suite. These are all interventions that we bring into our programs. We reassure them that they have made the right career choice, and we're going to sort of amplify that message. The second dimension is what we call emotional depletion. And that's this sense of just being drained, nothing left to give, nothing to give myself, and therefore I have nothing to give the rest of my team. And that starts to have an impact on morale. It impacts on sleep quality. And we are seeing a slight gender difference there as well, and women seem to be doing a little worse on emotional depletion. And we could sort of speculate on why that might be. We think there should be more research in that area, because it goes directly to the diversity and inclusion sort of agenda. If we want more women in cyber, and by the way, this also maps to Gen Z, and it maps to neurodivergent. These are the 3 big diversity groups. And in each of those, we see that they are more prone to burnout than the general population within cyber. And we've got to go and look at that. And actually, I had a chance to talk to the White House as well by your introduction, Deirdre. And I was saying to them, you've got this great national strategy around recruitment and bringing people in, but what are you doing to keep them there? And particularly if diversity and inclusion is a key policy priority, then you need to be aware that we need to be doing more to support those specific groups. But particularly emotional depletion in women is something we really need to keep our eye on. And the third dimension of burnout is the one we call cynicism or depersonalization. And that's where you detach from the mission. It's this quiet quitting phenomenon where you're showing up, but you're not really passionate, you're not there like you used to be when you first came in. And that again has a very damaging effect on morale. I think you get the energy in the team where people are not fully committed like they were. They start to question, is anything that we're doing here making any difference? and you do get a bit cynical. So I think those are the three. I got to add, we are actually measuring more now, not around burnout, but parallel or ancillary metrics like sleep quality, where we see that we're doing about 2.5 times worse than the average adult. And this is on Australian population data. I think it'll be true of the US and Europe as well.
Yeah.
That's a massive effect, because when I mean, we would all know you're not sleeping well, you're not going to be performing well.
And you're going to get sick.
So there's that, and you're just not focusing, and your memory starts to suffer, and all of those consequences physiologically. The immune system goes down. So I think that is one. We've got another dozen or so metrics we bring in as to what you were saying about measuring. We measure pre and post, because we need to be able to show the organization and the individual, this is where we started and now this is where you are. So I think that's really important. But those at a high level are things. But the main flags for burnout, if you're listening to this and you're worrying and thinking maybe I'm burning out, just inquire back into, how am I feeling depleted?
Yeah.
Am I irritable? What are the indicators of compromise here? Sleep, irritability, issues with concentration, memory, focus, team, cohesion, whether there is conflict, hostility.
Yeah.
All of those things. These are the red flags. And I think if you're seeing the red flags, don't despair, because the great news is that these factors are all reversible.
Yes. We're going to talk about how to reverse this stuff in just about 5 minutes. I know that I'm sure we all want to comment on a few things you said. I'm so glad you talked about diversity, and the effect for women is worse, and for neurodivergent individuals it's worse, because as you were speaking, my mind was literally going, well, women live in that shit every day. that having to prove themselves, not being good enough, and on these out in corporate America, glass ceilings, and so that's why I'm extra passionate about this, is because, as I've always said, if the men who are running everything, and the majority of them anyways, are having these issues, then how would us minorities have it better? There's no way,
And the impact of the lockdowns and work from home has only kind of exaggerated the unequal distribution of household labor and emotional labor that falls on women. So that's it's only making it, I think, more pronounced.
Yeah, and so it's only to say that this is happening to most humans, I believe, today out in the world. This is not for cyber only. The difference in the comparison to healthcare workers these are infrastructure people. And these are homeland and security and organizational security and individual security, all of it. Like, this is life or death, which is the only difference in let's say other jobs. Overall, society is suffering greatly from the lack of love at work. And I use the word love. And I have a lot of history with using that word at work, and having to, be in pretty big rooms of, lots of millions and eventually billions of dollars on the line, wanting love in the culture. And, the bottom line is everybody finally got it. It didn't take too long, which is love is not sex. Love is having empathy and concern and compassion and responsibility to others at work, for equal treatment and for kind behavior, while we still produce and make money. There shouldn't be, we need to do one or the other. So yeah.
I just jump in there. I mean, I've had the same epiphany as well. I started talking about love or compassion initially, but now it's love. Love's a superpower.
Yes.
And in a war of attrition, where the attackers are seeking to disrupt us and wear us down, love is the thing that's going to get us through this. Love of our team, love of our profession, why we're doing this thing. Love then transforms into empathy. which again means that no one is left behind.
Yes.
You know, the old military thing,
Yes.
we leave nobody behind. That's
Always. Yeah.
that's our
Throw the rope.
bond, the
Yeah.
bond that glues society together. We cannot afford to lose that. And the attackers would love nothing better, you know, than to see us at each other's throats, forgetting about how to be kind. You know,
Yeah.
that whether they're doing it deliberately or is it the direct consequence of the fact that, unlike healthcare care workers, we're one of the few professions outside of active military where someone is actually attacking us.
Yeah,
They're
and I
trying to
think
ruin
that's
our
why
day.
ransomware is such an effective attack, because it leverages. And I don't think people are thoughtful enough about why ransomware is such a nightmarish scenario, but it's really attacking your confidentiality and your availability and your integrity all at the same time. And so not only are you, as an organization dealing with some kind of breach of privacy, and we're trying to sort of figure out what the scope of that is and what records and who we have to notify and what the legal implications are, but your business is down, and you literally, your day-to-day business operations aren't working, and that's a nightmare scenario, and they know that, and that's why ransomware is so effective.
They have time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right too. Yeah.
There's a fuse on it.
Yep.
There's a higher consequence that you've already suffered breach. You already suffered loss. Now there's a fuse that can triple what you've just lost.
It works.
Yeah.
That's why people pay.
Yeah. Love, I want to come back to this real quick. This notion of love. I often find people thinking, well, if somebody seems like an introvert, they don't need love, or they're too quiet, they don't want to be bothered. It's like, no, that's not. It's not. Love isn't based on how one interacts socially. Every single human wants to feel love more than anything, and love shows up in just literally our words, our tone, and then if we manage people, having measurable agreements to them. So we're going to come back to love when we get to solutions. There's one more thing that we have to talk about here, because you used the word trauma earlier, and it's a big one, because I don't think that people really understand what trauma means. And anybody in cyber who deals with incidents is in trauma a lot. Because let me tell you what trauma means to me. My heart races at high speed for long periods of time. That is one. And I, as a CEO, I have incidents, and thank gosh, they've been minor. But still, I remember and can feel the moments of, holy shit, what? And oh my gosh, and that fear, it could just eat your body and soul to hurt, to feel some physical pain beyond the heart palpitation. That's just what I hear when I heard you use that word trauma. And I know our fighters and our protectors are dealing with incidents that make them feel that minimally. What else, Peter, is the trauma?
Trauma is really interesting, Deirdre, because the way that our human neurology and our psychology is designed is that we have a certain threshold that we can process in real time what's going on. But when that exceeds, when we go into buffer overflow, we sublimate. And so we're pushing it down so that we can go back and deal with it later. And trauma is basically that unresolved emotional energy, the shock to the system that we've not gone back and done the processing and learned the lessons from it and then integrated it, and we become strong from it, actually, if we can process it properly. And so in a breach situation, what's tending to happen is everyone's firing on all cylinders, and you're trying to get the thing under control. You're trying to understand it. You're trying to mitigate it. You've got all these external pressures. You've got legislation as well now. And so basically you're just having to say, let me get through this now. And then, we can go and get things back into normal later. Well, the thing is that unless you do the intervention, that trauma remains. And I mean, we've seen it in military when Richard Miller took the IREST protocol that we use in CyberMinds back into the military from the returning veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan. And they were presenting with the highest levels of clinical trauma on a scale of 0 to 80, the clinical scale. They were coming in at 79 and 80. And this trauma can remain for decades. I mean, you hear the classic stories of the car backfiring and the person diving under the bed because they think it's a gun going off. I mean, so trauma does not auto-resolve in many cases.
Right.
And so so I think in cybersecurity in particular, and the other problem with it is we can't see that we're getting attacked. And so it's almost like you're dealing with an unseen attacker. You're dealing with the intruder in the house in the middle of the night that you know they're there, but you can't see them. And so I think there is a lot to be said around acknowledging this aspect of working in cybersecurity, particularly in a ransomware or a breach type situation, where we really need to be alert to the fact that the teams may actually be undergoing trauma. And the closer you can bring the intervention to the actual situation, even during a breach, give them some time out, get them to step away. We take them deep into the protocol that we deliver. What we're doing is we're mitigating the human vector. We're mitigating the human breach because we are actually at some level feeling violated by the situation.
Right.
And so I think trauma is something I think we're only just beginning to be able to get that narrative out there that and I think the CrowdStrike thing, even though it wasn't a breach in this case, it's a bit of a preview of what that might look like. And we have been approached by organizations now to say maybe we need some trauma support for our IT teams because of exactly what happened.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'd like it for everybody, please, Peter. That being said, particularly those poor people that are out there supporting us in the retail world, my goodness, and our coffees and everything else. But I like how you use this word. It's not going to these words auto resolve. Trauma isn't going to auto resolve. I would say burnout's not going to auto resolve. We're just getting worse. So we're going to what does that mean? That means there has to be organizational action as well as individual action. It is two things that need to happen together, right? And so maybe this is a good time for us, and as we'll have many other podcast webinars where we can continue to talk about stats and problems and define things for folks. But let's take the last maybe 15 minutes or so here to move into the solution of it's not going to auto resolve, whether it's burnout or trauma, that doesn't exist.
Yep.
And I know for me personally, and Dom, I know I can speak for you on this, but I definitely want to hear your thoughts, is that when I first came to you just over 2 years ago and said, I've been telling people what to do, how to manage their people, and use our platform to do it, and so that they can, have job descriptions that are correct and look at their capabilities and manage their talent so they don't lose them. And I got challenged by a client to say, do it for me. Who the hell's got the time for that? And here we are 2 years later. Not only are we doing incredible engagements, and we also, our platform supports it. I never asked you, like, what did you think? As somebody who's out there who was an attacker for many, many years in your career, a defender, and then of course a CISO for the last 20 years. What did you think when I said that to you originally? I'm curious. And what's it been like for you? You can even skip the first one if you want, but what's it been like for you to be out there working with these chief information security officers to retain their talent while also creating operational efficiency and maturity for resiliency and automation and scalability? What's that been like for you? And I couldn't have done any of this without you. So
two-part question. I'll answer the first one honestly, of course. at first introduction, I'm highly cynical, and to apply compliance to a person, I kind of mocked it, balked it, didn't shun it, was open enough to think about it. As this has progressed into the number of clients that we've gone through, the thing that kept bubbled back to the top for me is cyber is a very people-centric industry.
Hmm.
We tend to overlay it with technology and depend on technology. And you could even say that AI is augmenting people. At the close of the book, the drawing of the shades, the closing of the door, it's still people centric. The people that build the technology, the people that implement the technology, the people that tune the technology, the people that replace the technology, and the people that become victims to cybercrime. On the other side to it, it's a whole gamut of people. As someone who's very familiar with the attacking side, it's very, very people centric. Anonymous people, I've worked with people that I've never met that are incredible at their craft. So I rewound a bit from that initial introduction and said, you know what, this is people centric. And as we kind of look at organizations, we really lean back on what we started with, and that's what is success.
Yeah.
And when we started to go through this, when we were amalgamating, saying, we'll build job descriptions and put the puzzle pieces together. When you said, let's look at strategy, let's look at MSSPs, let's make it a holistic, centric picture that says this is what success is driven by: the strategy and the cyber and the organization. What is the capabilities that you have today, and what do you need to get to that success? And we help along, the strategy along the way. So both answers is wasn't sure, and then convinced myself it's a people-centric industry. And yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. It only took our first engagement where, after looking at it and consulting back to the CISO, like, your workforce is also your contractors, your consultants, and your MSSP. Your workforce is not just your FTEs. And to help you get out of burnout, to help you retain, to help you advance your security posture, then we need to look at all of these people like talent, understand what they're all doing every day, give you that view right now so that you can make strategic decisions about how to look at a 3 to 5 year roadmap of talent development. And it's super measurable. And so for me, that was, a real wonderful light bulb moment, Dom. And you're right. Once we, second one on and been doing that, it's been game changing. So, let's talk about solutions, Peter. Those are, we're focused on that solution of, here's what everybody's really doing in a view that is super clear. We're the founders of the taxonomy, of the common language, and all those things. And then we're saying, hey, here's what you could do to train and develop people, and what you can look like in 3 to 5 years, and what your security strategy can get to. And how are you going to do that? Because it's not just as easy as saying how to do that without looking at time management and caring for people's mental health. Those are two things that we have really taken a look at and implemented from day one, and we're just continuing to go deeper and deeper into, which is, how much time does somebody really have to work every, and also care for themselves. And caring for themselves is sleep. Caring for themselves is eating home cooked meals as much as possible, / 90% of the time, or your health expectancy goes way down. Drinking, water. I mean, for me, I have to set cups of water out and drink them in between calls and down them just to make damn sure I have a way to deal with it. So there's that. There's exercise. There's time for loved ones. There's time for training. There's time for vacation. There's time for hobbies and special interests. So all of that time has to still be had and work. somehow there's like, that's not all in the work word. And so I know you've been looking at sleep, and I want to talk about it because one of the things that, we've been doing is to get to that level of being, okay, it's this much time. This is how much time. If you plug in everything I just said into a calendar, and I'm a big fan of working a calendar, then then everything left is quote work time, because it's not, training has to be in there, as you heard me say, and time to take the training, time to take the test. Like, I'm talking, map that stuff all out in a calendar, and then what's left is work time. And if you know what everybody's doing, you can manage that way. So I know that you've been researching sleep. I want to hear about it. And then I want to hear about a little bit more about the programs that you're implementing that are super, of course, complementary, which is why we're partnering here together to say that if an organization is doing everything that I just said that CyberSN brings in as a program, and they have what you and your REST technology bring, uh, what can we impact? And that's off to you now.
For me, Deirdre, to put it in one word, it's all about optimization. This is the mission for us, for you, for us.
Yes.
It should be for the CISO.
Mm-hmm.
What is optimization? It's bringing our best game, bringing our best selves to the game. That means we want to be on when we need to be on, and we need to be able to switch off when we need to switch off. And so we have to become much better at delineation of that work-life balance, which goes to your calendar, structure. But I think for me personally, and I've told this story before, for me, the neuroscience is the underpinning principle, the dynamic that governs everything that we do in life. How we sleep, how we interact with people, how we perform in our role, how we embrace life. Also, the flip side, how we suffer when we don't take care of the neurology. So this is another whole podcast that we should do for sure.
Yeah, the brain.
But basically, we are not evolved for a cyber threat environment. Evolution, and this is a talk I gave at Gartner and also at RSA, evolution optimized us for a physical threat environment where we could see the adversary, we could encounter them, we could hopefully prevail, and then everything is designed to return to equilibrium. In a virtual 24/7 attack sort of environment, there's no signal, there's no cue to tell our neurology that we are now safe.
Right.
And so by default, we stay always on because we're always technically at risk of an attack at any time. And so as a result, even if consciously we're off the job, subconsciously we're still running cycles. And to the sleep point, it means that it's breaking through into our sleep. We're waking in the middle of the night because the subconscious is never, the thing about the subconscious, it's like the operating system. We don't have visibility of it. We're up in the application layer. That's where we're living life. But really, it's the OS that's governing our entire way that we respond to life. And if we've got critical unpatched vulnerabilities down in the OS, in my language, in terms of unprocessed trauma and stress, that's going to break through because it wants to be heard. I mean, Richard Miller, when we talk about in his IREST program that we use, he says these things are messengers. Fear is a messenger. Powerful emotions are messengers. These are things that we need to be paying attention to. And if we don't, the consequences will be interrupted sleep, difficult relationships, inability to be our best, to optimize ourselves. And so for me, the whole solution is around optimization.
Yeah.
And the protocol that Richard Miller has given us, he's now the chair of our Global Advisory Council. He's also a founding director of CyberMinds in the US because we're now incorporated in America, Australia, and the UK. But Richard's view on this is, we bring the protocol in and we are helping people return to that state of equilibrium. And we are building, actually, and this is the mind-blowing part, we are actually restructuring the brain under principles of neuroplasticity so that those areas that have become enlarged, so the brain will develop according to what it perceives as the need. If it's a high stress environment, it's going to be restructuring, assuming that stress is now the new default. And so it better start building things that support you in a stress environment, but not in a good way. And so if we give it peace and rest and a return to equilibrium, it will go, oh, maybe I am safe now. I can start to build out my area of emotional regulation, and I can build out my area of empathy.
Yeah.
And we get a beautiful flood as we go through the different stages of the protocol. We get a beautiful flood of hormones, neurochemicals like serotonin, which our mood is better, and dopamine, and also oxytocin, which is the bonding hormone. I mean, when we talk about love from a neurophysiological point of view, love is really the capacity to be part of a community and to be fully giving of yourself and to be able to receive. And I think if we can map that back into cybersecurity, that's how we build strong teams. That's how we are optimizing our teams.
That's right. We're going to
But
take
we
that.
have to give them the time, and we have to give them the techniques and the resources where we can do that. And to be honest, you know, companies spend millions and millions on technological solutions.
Yeah.
I think, given what Dom was saying about this as a human issue,
Yeah.
we should be spending, I don't know what percentage, but we should be allocating a very significant proportion of our investment in human resilience.
Yes. Yes. And I do want to have us come back and talk about the brain and neuroscience. That's one of the things I love about you so much. I'm infatuated by the brain. I'm haven't studied anywhere near what you have, and yet when I was in my early 30s, I stumbled upon a program that was all about retraining my brain on emotion from an emotional intelligence perspective. And what I learned was that unlike IQ, EQ can grow. It never caps out. It can change. You know, IQ's test taking, that's a different thing, but emotional intelligence can. And I completely agree that when one gets that kind of training and resetting and care, they grow as a human too. You know, happiness is a growth hormone, you know, right? Fear and anger causes, you know, going backwards, not forwards in our bodies and our minds. And so how we keep people in the love of the brain. And that's what we're going to come back to next. And your programs and your techniques and making sure that cyber professionals have access to them is really important, because this isn't going to it's not an auto resolve isn't going to happen, and it isn't going to happen just by, you know, reading books or podcasts. We need programs. What we're doing separately and certainly together is programs. So I want to thank all of you for coming to engage in this conversation. We are absolutely going to spend more time on this very, very soon. But before we wrap, Chad, Dom, either of you want to say anything about the end of what Peter brought here on the brain and programming?
I'd like to leave things on a hopeful note, which is, you know, as I've been doing my research and you know, looking at the decades worth of cyber SN data and Dom's research background, Dom's helped me to kind of focus my research questions, I think, in a little bit more of a direct way. Yes, burnout is a huge issue, but it's not evenly distributed. In other words, some organizations do better than others, and therefore there is hope, because
Yeah.
we can study what those organizations do and say, okay, like let's figure out what those factors are. Let's emulate that and make programs out of them, because there are organizations where people are dealing with the same level of threat environment and the same complexity, and they're doing markedly better on studies of burnout and on attrition and on attracting and retaining key talent. And so there is hope, because otherwise nobody would be doing better than anybody else.
Yeah, for sure. And we're going to continue to make sure that we're bringing hope and help to everybody ourselves. So yes, it's very true that there are some organizations where people are resilient and happy and healthy. It's just not as many as we need.
Yep.
And so we're going to mimic that plus bring more to this. Awesome.
Great.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, it was great to be with everybody. We're excited to continue these conversations. Let's bring more love to the community.
Yeah.
Have a great night, day.